All right, welcome to this training section that's going to go ahead and double click on the actual liability waiver. So that way you actually understand the kind of premise of what it is before we actually get into the tactical. It's going to be a very quick training section here. So the liability waiver is an agreement that helps the client really understand the risk of participating in the services that you provide as a health and wellness professional. Okay, so it really allows them to agree not to hold you responsible for any potential injuries or damage that could happen from engaging in those activities, right? So it's kind of like, whenever you go parasailing or, skydiving or, any dangerous kind of thing, they make you sign that agreement. Well, obviously, they're not working out with you to make it dangerous, but the point is that, hey, mistakes happen, accidents happen, those kinds of things happen, right? And so you just want to make sure that you are legally protected, especially when you're dealing with clients who sometimes, quite frankly, clients make mistakes. They kind of do dumb stuff sometimes. And the point is that you want to make sure that you are protected accordingly, right? And so if you are a health and wellness professional working with clients in person, specifically on their movement, this especially applies to you, right? Because you're working with somebody a little bit more hands-on, right? But it also applies to those people who are health and wellness professionals that are working with clients remotely, because you also want to make sure that you are not being held liable for anything that they did on their own accord because they didn't understand the risks that were associated with it. And so by having a liability waiver on record, right, and by having them sign it, they're saying, hey, yes, I understand the risk, but at the same time, this is very important, just because you had them sign a liability waiver, this does not mean that you as a professional all of a sudden you just become negligent and you start not taking things under consideration. This is the reason why it's so important. We talk about this all the time. It's very important to understand, hey, what are the limitations that the client might have? Make sure you have an open relationship with the client. This is the reason why when you go through coach certification, when you go through getting certified, you start to learn some of these skills in terms of, hey, how do I actually be a good coach? What are the coaching skills that are necessary in order for me to build that rapport and understand the needs of the client? And so it is our responsibility to fully understand the client's abilities, so that way when you recommend to them a program that's going to help them accomplish their goals, it does so with their limitations in mind. Again, don't take the liability waiver as a sign for you to be able to push the clients above their limits if their body is not capable for that. This is very important because we see a lot of times, you see health and wellness professionals who may not be as sophisticated, who might not be as weathered in the game. They start helping their clients start to do like 1-rep maxes and, when they can barely do the basic movements. No. You want to make sure that you are being extremely cognizant of this and you're meeting the client where they are at. So that way it's a healthy, sustainable approach while still, yes, challenging them to get better, but not past their limits. Now, another note I want to go ahead and mention about this is that the liability waiver is already included in the new client agreement. Okay, so we did set this up prior to this specific training, right? So there's a whole separate training section about the new client agreement. However, the liability waiver is not meant to be something that the new client has to sign. This is something that you would only use as standalone if, right, the one that we'll go ahead and set up together is if somebody comes to you and they're going to get, let's say, a free workout, or they're going to work with you for free, or a free session, or a free, coaching session, or whatever, you're going to go ahead and have them sign the liability waiver because they have not yet become a client. Does that make sense? I hope so, okay? The other thing that's important for us to mention here is that this is going to be another one of those legally binding agreements that's going to be important to make sure that you do have that feature inside of your Client Kit account. And the way you get that feature inside of your Client Kit account is by having the Client Kit Pro account. And so we talked about this before. In order to set up legally binding IP address, signatures, and agreements, we previously had to use two different softwares. We had to use JotForm as well as PandaDocs. That would cost us close to $75 per month. And then that's not including all the other features that we would have to go ahead and hodgepodge together, right? And so just as a reminder, if you're not a Client Kit Pro plan yet, you want to make sure you follow the instructions that are located in order to upgrade in the original previous training section. We talked about the types of legal client agreements. Okay. And then again, remember they have that logic around, hey, if you are a professional, that is the reason why you are probably going ahead and having, payments and invoices, legally binding agreements, because you are becoming a professional. And that's the reason why the professional plan, which is normally $997 a month, which makes sense because we've gone ahead and cost benefited all of the different softwares that you would normally have to have if you didn't have Client Kit. $997 is honestly a steal for as many other softwares you have to sign up for. But then how much more of a steal is it when you're actually getting 90% off, right? And so that's the reason why we just make sure that you do actually have that professional plan, so that way you can actually follow along with the features that are going to be located in here. Okay, so similar to what we did with the actual new client agreement, this is also going to be broken up into multiple parts. And so we're going to go ahead and talk about part 1 in part 2, which is editing the Google Doc and then building the waiver inside of ClientKit for step number 1. And then part 3 and part 4, we'll go ahead and break that up into a separate training section that is going to be step 2, where we're going to talk about the email notifications and how to actually send the liability waiver. Okay, so we are going to break this up into 2 parts that are going to be immediately right after this training. But this specific training section was to just go ahead and double click so that way you have a better understanding of the liability waiver and what is going to be coming up next. So don't cut the momentum, keep on going, because immediately right after this, we're going to go ahead and talk about creating your liability waiver. And then in the second training, we'll talk about testing the liability waiver. So keep the momentum going, get into the action steps, and we will catch you in the next training section.